I'm Sarah, and I'm 36 years old. I used to be a high school teacher in Portland, Oregon, living what everyone around me thought was the perfect life. I had a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood, a job I loved, and a husband who, on the surface, seemed like everything a woman could want. We'd been married for 2 years, and I was 6 months pregnant with our first child, a baby girl we'd already started calling our little miracle. But what no one knew, what I didn't even fully understand until it was almost too late, was that the man I'd promised to spend my life with was capable of something so horrific, so unthinkable, that it would nearly cost me and my baby our lives. The day my mother-in-law came to visit was supposed to be just another day of preparation for our daughter's arrival. Instead, it became the day I learned that the person sleeping next to me every night was a monster, and that his mother had raised him to be exactly that. What happened in my living room while I was 6 months pregnant, belly swollen with life, will haunt me forever. But what happened at the hospital, what that nurse said that made my husband freeze in pure terror, that's what saved us both. But before I tell you exactly what happened that day, before I describe the moment I felt my husband's fists connecting with my pregnant body, before I tell you about the blood and the fear and the moment I thought I was going to lose my daughter, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hit that like button right now. I need you to subscribe to this channel. And I need you to drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are, because what I'm about to tell you is something that every single person needs to hear. This isn't just my story. This is a warning. This is a story about how the people who are supposed to love you can be the ones who hurt you most. Trust me when I say you'll want to hear every single second of what I'm about to share, because the ending is something nobody sees coming. Let me take you back to the beginning, back before everything fell apart. 2 years before that terrible day, I met Marcus at a teacher's conference. He was charming, attentive, successful. He worked in finance, made good money, and he pursued me with the kind of intensity that felt romantic at the time. Looking back now, I can see it for what it really was: obsession, control disguised as devotion. But back then, I was 34 years old, watching my friends settle down and start families, and Marcus seemed like the answer to everything I'd been hoping for. He was 38, established in his career, ready for marriage and children. We dated for 8 months before he proposed, and we were married 4 months after that. Everyone said we moved fast, but it felt right. God, how stupid I was. How blind. The first year of marriage was good, or at least I thought it was. Marcus was attentive, maybe too attentive. He always wanted to know where I was, who I was with, what I was doing. He'd text me constantly throughout the day, and if I didn't respond quickly enough, he'd call. If I didn't answer the call, he'd show up at my school or wherever I said I'd be, claiming he was just worried about me, just wanted to make sure I was safe. My friends thought it was sweet. My mother thought I'd finally found a good man who cared. I pushed down the uncomfortable feeling in my gut that told me this wasn't normal, that this was suffocating. I told myself I was lucky to have someone who loved me so much. His mother, Barbara, was a whole different nightmare from the start. From the moment I met her, I could tell she thought no woman would ever be good enough for her precious son. She was cold to me at our wedding, criticized the dress I chose, the flowers, the venue. She made comments about my weight, my career, my family background. Marcus would laugh it off, tell me that's just how she was, that she meant well. He'd say his mother was protective because his father had died when he was young, and she'd sacrificed everything to raise him. He expected me to just take it, to smile and nod and accept her abuse because she was his mother, and like a fool, I did. I bit my tongue. I swallowed my anger. I tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law, thinking that eventually she'd warm up to me. She never did. When I got pregnant, everything shifted. I was so happy, so excited. We'd been trying for 6 months, and when I saw those 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, I cried tears of pure joy. Marcus seemed happy too, at first. He told everyone we knew, posted about it on social media, talked about how he couldn't wait to be a father. But as my belly grew, as my body changed, I started to notice things. he became more critical. He'd make comments about how much weight I was gaining, how I needed to be careful not to let myself go. He'd police what I ate, questioning every meal, every snack. When I was tired, exhausted from growing a human being inside me, he'd accuse me of being lazy, of using the pregnancy as an excuse. The attention he used to shower on me turned into scrutiny, into control that felt like it was tightening around my neck like a noose. By the time I was 6 months pregnant, I was walking on eggshells in my own home. I was teaching full-time, coming home exhausted, and expected to keep the house perfect, to cook elaborate meals, to cater to Marcus's every need while my body was literally creating life, and I did it. I did it all because I was scared of what would happen if I didn't, even though I couldn't have articulated that fear at the time. I just knew that keeping him happy kept the peace, and peace was what I needed for my baby's sake. What I didn't know was that there was no amount of perfect that would ever be enough. The monster was always there, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. That moment came when Barbara announced she was coming to stay with us for a week to help prepare for the baby. I didn't want her there. Every instinct in my body screamed no, but Marcus insisted. He said his mother knew best, that she'd raised him alone and successfully, that I should be grateful for her help and expertise. So I agreed. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, prepared the guest room, bought all her favorite foods. I tried to make everything perfect, so maybe, just maybe, this visit would go smoothly. I should have known better. Barbara arrived on a Monday afternoon in late September. I'd taken a half-day off from school to be home when she got there, to welcome her properly. The moment she walked through the door, the criticism started. The house was too cold. The guest room wasn't arranged properly. The food I'd prepared for dinner wasn't what she wanted. I smiled through it all, biting my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Marcus said nothing to defend me. He just nodded along with his mother, agreeing with her complaints, apologizing to her for my shortcomings. I was 6 months pregnant, exhausted, and being treated like a servant in my own home, and my husband said nothing. The next 3 days were torture. Barbara reorganized my kitchen without asking, threw away spices and ingredients she deemed unnecessary, rearranged my pantry to her liking. She went through my closet and made comments about my maternity clothes, saying I looked frumpy, and that I needed to make more effort for Marcus's sake. She criticized how I decorated the nursery, said the colors were wrong, that the furniture was arranged incorrectly, that I clearly had no idea what I was doing. And every single time, Marcus agreed with her. Every single time, he took her side. I felt like I was losing my mind, like I was being erased in my own home. On Thursday afternoon, I came home from school to find Barbara in the nursery. She'd completely rearranged everything. The crib was in a different spot. The dresser had been moved. The decorations I'd carefully chosen and lovingly placed were taken down and replaced with things she'd brought from her own home, old dated items from when Marcus was a baby. I stood in the doorway, feeling tears burn in my eyes, feeling my baby kick inside me as if she could sense my distress. This was supposed to be my space to prepare for my daughter. This was supposed to be my joy. And this woman had violated it completely. I took a deep breath and walked into the room. My voice was shaking, but I kept it calm, kept it polite. I said, "Barbara, I appreciate that you're trying to help, but I had the nursery set up the way I wanted it. Could we please put it back?" She turned to look at me like I'd just slapped her across the face. Her expression was pure venom. She said, "Excuse me? I've raised a child, Sarah. I know what I'm doing. This room was a disaster and I fixed it. You should be thanking me, not questioning me." I felt something inside me snap. Maybe it was the pregnancy hormones. Maybe it was 4 days of constant disrespect and criticism. Maybe it was 2 years of biting my tongue and swallowing my dignity. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't let her take this from me too. I said, my voice firmer now, "This is my baby's nursery. I'm her mother, and I want it the way I had it. Please don't go through my things without asking me first." It was the most assertive I'd been with her in the entire 2 years I'd known her. It was barely even assertive. It was just me standing up for myself in the most basic way. But to Barbara, it was the ultimate disrespect. Her face turned red. She started yelling. actually yelling at me in my own home. She said I was ungrateful, that I was a spoiled brat who didn't know the first thing about being a mother, that Marcus had made a mistake marrying me, that I wasn't good enough for her son and I never would be. She said I was selfish and lazy, and that it was a miracle Marcus had put up with me this long. The words kept coming, like daggers, each one designed to cut me down, to make me small. I stood there, hand on my pregnant belly, tears streaming down my face, unable to believe this was happening. I tried to speak, tried to defend myself, but she wouldn't stop. She wouldn't let me get a word in. She just kept attacking, kept tearing me apart with her words. And that's when Marcus came home. I heard the front door open, heard his footsteps coming down the hall, and I felt this wave of relief. Finally, I thought, finally, he'll see what she's really like. Finally, he'll defend me. He walked into the nursery, took one look at the scene, his mother red-faced and angry, me crying and shaking with my hand protectively over my belly, and I waited for him to ask what was wrong, to comfort me, to be my husband. Instead, his mother launched into her version of events. She told him I'd been disrespectful to her, that I'd yelled at her for trying to help, that I'd told her she didn't know what she was doing, that I'd been horrible to her all week. Every word was a lie or a twisted version of the truth, but Marcus didn't even look at me. He didn't ask for my side. He just believed her. Immediately. Completely. His face changed. I watched it happen. Watched the man I married disappear and something else take his place. His jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. And he turned to me with a look of pure rage that made my blood run cold. He said, his voice low and dangerous, "How dare you? How dare you disrespect my mother after everything she's done for us?" I tried to speak, tried to explain, but he cut me off. He said, "She came here to help you because God knows you need it. And this is how you treat her? You ungrateful." And then he called me a name I won't repeat. A vile, disgusting name that no husband should ever call his wife. I was in shock. I couldn't process what was happening. This was Marcus, my husband, the father of my baby. And he was looking at me like he hated me, like I was nothing, like I was garbage. I said, my voice barely a whisper, "Marcus, please let me explain, that's not what happened." But he didn't want to hear it. He took a step toward me, and I instinctively took a step back. Something in his eyes terrified me in a way I'd never experienced before. Barbara was just standing there, watching, and I swear to God there was satisfaction in her expression. She wanted this. She wanted to see him turn on me. Marcus grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh so hard I knew there would be bruises. He pulled me close to his face and said, "You will apologize to my mother right now." I was shaking, terrified, but I said, "Marcus, you're hurting me. Please let go." He didn't let go. He tightened his grip and I cried out in pain. And that's when everything went completely wrong. That's when my husband, the man who'd promised to love and protect me, the father of the child growing inside me, showed me exactly who he really was. He shoved me. Hard. I stumbled backward, trying to catch my balance, trying to protect my belly, but I fell. I hit the floor hard, landing partially on my side, my hands instinctively going to cradle my stomach to protect my baby. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a moment I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the terror of falling while pregnant. And before I could even process what had just happened, before I could get up, Marcus was on me. He was yelling, screaming things I can barely remember now because all I could focus on was protecting my baby. He kicked me, his foot connected with my back, and the pain was blinding. I curled into a ball, my arms wrapped around my belly, crying, begging him to stop, begging him to think about the baby. But he didn't stop. He kicked me again, and again, and then he was kneeling over me. And his fists, oh God, his fists, they were hitting me, my shoulders, my arms, my back. I was screaming, begging, pleading for him to stop, to please think about our daughter, but it was like he couldn't hear me, like he was someone else entirely. The pain was everywhere, radiating through my body, but worse than the physical pain was the terror, the absolute horror of knowing that my husband was beating me while I was pregnant with his child. I couldn't protect myself and protect my baby at the same time, and I was so scared, so terrified that he was going to hurt her, that his rage was going to kill our daughter. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like forever and no time at all, but suddenly, he stopped. He stood up, breathing hard, and I heard Barbara's voice saying something about how I'd brought this on myself, how I needed to learn respect. I couldn't believe it. She'd just watched her son beat his pregnant wife, and she was justifying it. She was condoning it. I lay there on the nursery floor, the room I decorated with so much love for my baby, curled around my belly, sobbing and shaking and bleeding. Yes, bleeding. I felt the wetness between my legs, felt the warm blood soaking into my clothes, and the terror that ripped through me in that moment was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. My baby. Something was wrong with my baby. I screamed. I screamed that I was bleeding, that something was wrong, that we needed to call 911. Marcus's face changed again. The rage disappeared, replaced by fear, by panic. Suddenly, he was the concerned husband again, kneeling beside me, trying to touch me. I flinched away from him, disgusted by his touch, terrified of him. He was saying, it's okay, we'll get you help," like he wasn't the reason I needed help in the first place. Like he hadn't just beaten his pregnant wife unconscious. Barbara disappeared, and I heard her on the phone, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. Everything was pain and fear and blood. So much blood. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman who lived next door, had heard the screaming. She'd heard me begging for my life, begging for my baby's life, and she'd called 911. I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was that suddenly there were sirens, and paramedics were in my house, in my nursery, and they were asking me questions I could barely answer because I was in so much pain. Because I was so terrified that my baby was dying inside me. They were professional, efficient, careful, but I could see the concern in their eyes when they saw the blood, when they took my vital signs, when they saw the marks already forming on my body. They loaded me onto a stretcher, and Marcus was right there, playing the part of the distraught husband. He was holding my hand, the hand attached to the arm he'd grabbed so viciously minutes before, and he was telling the paramedics that I'd fallen, that I'd tripped on something in the nursery and fallen hard. He was lying. Right there, with me bleeding and broken on a stretcher, he was lying to save himself. And I was too weak, too scared, too focused on whether my baby was alive to contradict him. I just needed to get to the hospital. I needed to know if my daughter was okay. Nothing else mattered in that moment. The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and fear. The paramedics were monitoring my baby's heartbeat, and I kept asking, "Is she okay? Can you hear her heartbeat? Please tell me she's okay." They were reassuring but non-committal, saying things like, "We're getting you to the hospital," and "They'll take good care of you both there." That's when I knew something was really wrong. They wouldn't give me a straight answer, which meant they were worried. I'd lost a lot of blood. I was having contractions at 6 months pregnant. I was having contractions, and that could only mean one thing. My body was trying to go into labor, trying to expel my baby who was far too premature to survive. The terror of that realization made me sob harder. I begged God, begged the universe, begged anyone who would listen to please let my baby be okay. I could survive anything, the pain, the betrayal, the horror of what Marcus had done, but I couldn't survive losing my daughter. I couldn't. We arrived at the ER, and everything moved quickly. They rushed me into an examination room, hooking me up to monitors, checking my vitals, checking the baby's heartbeat. A doctor came in, I don't even remember his name, and he was asking me questions about what happened, examining my injuries, and I kept deflecting, kept saying I fell. Because Marcus was right there in the room, standing in the corner, watching me with these eyes that held both fear and a warning. I was afraid to tell the truth with him there. I was afraid of what he might do later, what might happen when we got home. Even after what he'd done, even bleeding and battered in a hospital bed, I was still afraid of my husband. The baby's heartbeat was there, faint, irregular, concerning, But there, she was alive. But I was still bleeding, still having contractions, and the doctor said they needed to stop the labor, that if they couldn't, my baby wouldn't survive. They needed to run tests, do an ultrasound, monitor me closely. They started IV medications to try to stop the contractions, gave me something for the pain, and then they said they needed to do a full examination of my injuries, that they needed to document everything from my medical records. That's when a nurse came in, a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and an air of absolute authority. Her name was Jennifer, and I will remember her for the rest of my life as the woman who saved both me and my daughter. She introduced herself and started the intake process, asking routine questions about my medical history, my pregnancy, and then about my injuries. She asked how I got hurt, and I repeated the lie Marcus had fed me, said I tripped and fell in the nursery. But Jennifer looked at me, really looked at me, and then she looked at my injuries. She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her brain working, see her putting pieces together. She asked if I could lift my shirt so she could document the injuries on my back and sides. I did, wincing in pain, and I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw the bruises already forming, the pattern of them, the severity. She stepped back and looked at Marcus, who was still standing in the corner, trying to look concerned and worried. And then Jennifer did something that changed everything. Her voice was calm, professional, but there was steel in it when she spoke. She said, "Sir, I need you to know that by law, we photograph all injuries on pregnant patients who come through our ER, especially injuries consistent with trauma. These photographs are automatically sent to our hospital's domestic violence task force and the police department. There's nothing anyone can do to stop that process. It's already been triggered. It's hospital policy, completely automatic, and it's out of everyone's hands. The moment a pregnant patient comes in with injuries like this, the protocol activates. So those photos? They're already on their way to the authorities. Just so you're aware." The room went silent. I watched Marcus's face, and I will never forget what I saw. The color drained from his skin. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened slightly, and he just froze, completely froze, like someone had pressed pause on him. He understood what she'd just said. She told him, in the politest, most professional way possible, that he was caught, that there was evidence, that the authorities were already involved, that his abuse of me had been documented and reported, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She'd backed him into a corner, and he knew it. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw fear in his eyes instead of rage, and something in me shifted. Jennifer then turned to me and said, very calmly, "Mrs. Morrison, I need to ask you something important. The pattern of these injuries, the bruising on your arm that looks like finger marks, the bruising on your back and sides, the way they're distributed, they're not consistent with a simple fall. I've been a nurse for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of injuries from falls. These don't look like that. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to be honest with me, because your health and your baby's health depend on me understanding exactly what happened. How did you really get these injuries?" I looked at Marcus. He was staring at me, his face pale, his jaw clenched, and I could see him trying to signal me with his eyes, trying to will me to keep lying for him. But something had broken inside me when Jennifer spoke. She'd given me an out. She told me, without saying it directly, that I was safe, that he was caught, that I didn't have to protect him anymore. And more than that, she'd done it in a way that made him powerless to stop what was coming. She was smart, so smart, and she'd used the system to trap him, to protect me, to give me the opening I needed to tell the truth. But I still couldn't speak. Not with him in the room. I was too afraid. Jennifer saw my hesitation, saw me glance at Marcus, and she understood. She said, "You know what, I actually need to get some supplies from the other room, and sir, while I'm gone, I'm going to need you to step outside for just a moment. Hospital policy during examinations of pregnant patients, we need to maintain privacy and sterile protocol. There's a waiting room just down the hall. If you could head there now, I'll come get you when we're finished with the examination." It wasn't really hospital policy. She was lying, creating a reason to get him out of the room, and Marcus knew it. But what could he do? He couldn't refuse without looking suspicious, especially after what she'd said about the photographs and the police. He had no choice but to comply. He looked at me one more time, and I saw the threat in his eyes, the promise that this wasn't over, that there would be consequences for whatever I said once he was gone. But then he turned and walked out, and the moment the door closed behind him, I broke down completely. Jennifer came to my bedside immediately, took my hand gently, so gently, nothing like the way Marcus had grabbed it, and said, "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore. But I need you to tell me the truth. Did he do this to you? Did your husband beat you?" And I nodded. I couldn't speak through the sobs, but I nodded, and that was enough. Jennifer squeezed my hand and said, Okay, I'm so sorry this happened to you. But you did the right thing by telling me. Now I need you to listen carefully. I'm going to call security right now. They're going to come and make sure he doesn't come back into this room. Then I'm going to call the police, and they're going to come take your statement. And I'm going to call our social worker who specializes in domestic violence. Her name is Patricia, and she's wonderful. She's going to help you figure out what to do next. But first, we need to take care of you and your baby. So I'm going to do a full examination. I'm going to photograph everything, and yes, those photos really will go to the authorities, and we're going to make sure your daughter is okay. Can you do that with me? I nodded again, still crying, and Jennifer moved quickly. She called security first, and within minutes, there were 2 security guards stationed outside my room, with instructions that Marcus was not to come back in under any circumstances. Then she called the police and the social worker, and then she did the most thorough examination I've ever had. She documented every single injury, every bruise, every mark his hands had left on my body. She photographed everything from multiple angles. She was gentle and professional and kind, explaining everything she was doing, apologizing when she had to touch somewhere that hurt. And while she worked, she talked to me, asked me questions about my relationship, about how long this had been going on, about whether he'd hurt me before. I told her everything, how controlling he'd been from the start, how it had gotten worse during my pregnancy, how his mother enabled him, encouraged him, justified his behavior, how scared I'd been, how I'd felt trapped, how I'd been walking on eggshells for months, how I'd never imagined he would actually hurt me physically, especially while I was pregnant. How stupid I felt for not seeing the signs sooner, for not leaving before it got this bad. Jennifer stopped what she was doing and looked me right in the eyes. She said, "Listen to me very carefully. This is not your fault. You are not stupid. Abusers are master manipulators. They make you think you're crazy, that you're the problem, that you deserve what they do to you. But you don't. Nobody deserves this. And the fact that he did this to you while you were pregnant, while you were carrying his child, that tells me exactly what kind of man he is. You did nothing wrong. He did. And now he's going to face consequences." The police arrived about 30 minutes later, 2 officers, 1 male and 1 female. They were professional and respectful, and they took my statement while Jennifer stayed with me, holding my hand. I told them everything that had happened that day, from Barbara's arrival to the argument in the nursery to Marcus beating me while I was pregnant. I told them about the lies he'd told the paramedics. I told them I was afraid of what he'd do when he found out I'd told the truth. The female officer assured me that they would arrest him, that he wouldn't be going home, that they would help me get an emergency restraining order. She said that in our state, domestic violence against a pregnant woman carried enhanced charges, that it was taken very seriously, and that with the evidence Jennifer had collected, and my statement and the 911 call from the neighbor, they had more than enough to charge him. Patricia, the social worker, arrived around the same time, and she sat with me and explained my options. She talked about restraining orders, about safe houses if I needed a place to go, about legal aid, about support groups for domestic violence survivors. She gave me pamphlets and phone numbers and resources. She told me that whatever I decided to do next, I didn't have to do it alone, that there were people and systems in place to help me. And for the first time in hours, in months maybe, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like maybe I could survive this. The doctors managed to stop my contractions. The bleeding slowed and then stopped. My daughter's heartbeat stabilized, grew stronger. They did an ultrasound, and she looked okay. No signs of placental abruption, no signs of distress. It was a miracle. After everything that had happened, after the trauma my body had endured, my daughter was still fighting, still holding on. The doctor said I'd need to stay in the hospital for at least 48 hours for monitoring, that I'd need to be on bed rest for the remainder of my pregnancy, that this was a high-risk situation now, and they'd need to watch me closely. But she was alive. My baby girl was alive, and that was all that mattered. The police went to talk to Marcus in the waiting room. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know they arrested him there at the hospital. They took him away in handcuffs, charged him with felony domestic violence, assault on a pregnant woman, and several other charges I can't remember now. They also took a statement from Barbara, who apparently tried to leave when she saw the police coming but was stopped. And here's the thing, Barbara, in her arrogance, in her absolute conviction that her son had done nothing wrong, actually corroborated my story. She admitted he'd hit me. She justified it, said I'd deserved it for disrespecting her, but she admitted it happened. She handed them a confession without even realizing it. The police told me later that her statement actually strengthened their case because it confirmed the assault happened and showed a pattern of abuse being normalized and enabled in that family. I called my parents from the hospital, and they drove the 3 hours from Salem immediately. When they arrived and saw me bruised, battered, hooked up to machines monitoring my baby, my mother broke down crying. My father looked like he wanted to kill someone. They couldn't believe it. They'd liked Marcus, thought he was a good man, thought I was happy. They'd had no idea what was going on behind closed doors, because I'd hidden it so well, made excuses, covered for him. My mother held me while I cried and told them everything. My father kept saying he wished he'd known. He would have gotten me out of there. He would have protected me. But I told them it wasn't their fault. It was Marcus's fault. Only Marcus's fault. I stayed in the hospital for 3 days in the end, just to be safe. The doctors wanted to make absolutely sure my daughter was okay before they let me go. During those 3 days, I learned that Marcus had been denied bail because he was considered a flight risk and a danger to me. I learned that the judge had granted my emergency restraining order, that he couldn't come within 500 feet of me or contact me in any way. I learned that his mother had actually tried to visit me in the hospital to talk some sense into me, but security had stopped her per the restraining order I'd also taken out against her. I learned that my story had gotten around the hospital, and dozens of staff members, doctors, nurses, techs, had come by to check on me, to offer support, to tell me I was brave. But I didn't feel brave. I felt broken and scared and angry. God, I was so angry. I'm still angry. I'm angry that the man I trusted, the man I married, the man I was having a child with turned out to be a monster. I'm angry that his mother raised him to think that violence was an acceptable response to a woman standing up for herself. I'm angry that I ignored the warning signs, that I let his controlling behavior slide, that I didn't leave sooner. I'm angry that I have to raise my daughter alone because her father couldn't control his temper. I'm angry that she'll grow up knowing her father beat her mother while she was in the womb. I'm angry that this is our story now, that this trauma is part of our lives forever. The anger burns in me constantly, and my therapist says that's okay, that anger is appropriate, that I have every right to feel what I'm feeling. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I went home with my parents. I couldn't go back to the house I'd shared with Marcus. The thought of being in that nursery where he'd beaten me made me physically ill. My parents packed up my things, got everything I needed, and moved me back into my childhood bedroom. I was 36 years old, 6 months pregnant, and living with my parents again because my husband had tried to kill me and our baby. The humiliation of that was almost as bad as the physical pain. Almost. The legal process started immediately. I filed for divorce. Marcus's lawyer tried to negotiate, tried to get me to drop the restraining order, to agree to mediation, to let Marcus have unsupervised access to the baby when she was born. I refused everything. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Rebecca, who specialized in domestic violence cases and worked with me pro bono through a legal aid program, made it very clear that Marcus was lucky I wasn't pushing for termination of parental rights. She argued that he'd forfeited any right to be a father when he'd beaten me while I was pregnant with his child, when he'd endangered our daughter's life with his violence. The prosecutor on his criminal case was equally aggressive, refusing to offer any plea deals, insisting this go to trial. But Marcus pled guilty. His lawyer advised him that with the evidence, the photographs, my statement, the neighbor's 911 call, his own mother's statement, he would lose at trial and face maximum sentencing. So he pled guilty to felony domestic violence and assault on a pregnant woman in exchange for a slightly reduced sentence. He got 3 years in prison, 5 years probation after that, mandatory anger management classes, and supervised visitation only if I agreed to allow it once he was released. The judge also upheld the restraining order indefinitely. Marcus would never be allowed to come near me again without legal supervision. It wasn't enough. 3 years wasn't enough for what he'd done, for the trauma he'd caused, for the life he'd destroyed. But it was something. It was justice, however imperfect. I spent the last 3 months of my pregnancy on bed rest at my parents' house. It was difficult, being immobile, being dependent, having so much time to think about everything that had happened. I went to therapy twice a week, processing the trauma, working through the fear and anger and grief. Yes, grief, because even though Marcus had hurt me, I still had to grieve the life I'd thought I was going to have, the marriage I'd thought I had, the family I'd imagined for my daughter. That man didn't exist, had never existed, but I still had to mourn the loss of the illusion. My therapist helped me understand that leaving an abusive relationship, even when you know it's the right thing to do, still involves loss and grief, and that those feelings were valid. My daughter was born 2 weeks before her due date, in late December. It was a scheduled C-section because my doctor was concerned about the stress of labor given everything my body had been through. They wanted to control as many variables as possible to ensure both of us made it through safely. I was terrified going into that operating room, terrified that something would go wrong at the last minute, that after surviving everything we'd been through, I'd somehow lose her. But I didn't. She came into this world screaming, healthy and perfect, weighing 6 pounds and 8 ounces. They placed her on my chest, and I looked down at her tiny face, her perfect little fingers, and I sobbed. I sobbed with relief and joy and overwhelming love, but also with rage. Rage that her father had tried to kill her before she was even born. Rage that he'd never hold her like this, never know her, never be the father she deserved. But also gratitude that she was alive, that we'd both survived, that we had a chance at a life together. I named her Emma Grace. Grace because that's what had saved us, the grace of a neighbor who called 911, the grace of a nurse who knew exactly what to say to trap my abuser, the grace of strangers who rallied around us when we needed help most. Emma because I'd always loved that name, and I wasn't about to let Marcus take that choice away from me too. He'd taken so much, but he wasn't taking this. She was mine, my daughter, my miracle, and I was going to give her the best life I possibly could, even if I had to do it alone. The first few months with Emma were the hardest of my life. I was recovering from major surgery, dealing with postpartum hormones, caring for a newborn, and processing severe trauma all at the same time. I had nightmares, constantly nightmares, where Marcus found us, where he hurt Emma the way he'd hurt me, where I couldn't protect her. I'd wake up in a panic, rush to her crib to make sure she was breathing, and then sit there in the dark, watching her sleep, unable to go back to bed myself. My parents were incredible, helping with everything, but I struggled. I struggled with depression, with anxiety, with PTSD that made loud noises or sudden movements send me into a panic. I struggled with the physical reminders of what had happened, the scars on my arm where his fingers had dug in, the way my back still ached where he'd kicked me, the C-section scar that was a permanent reminder that Emma's birth was complicated by trauma. But I kept going. I kept going because I had to, because Emma needed me, because giving up wasn't an option. I continued therapy, added a support group for domestic violence survivors, and slowly, painfully, started to heal. The support group was eye-opening. Hearing other women's stories, realizing I wasn't alone, Understanding that abuse follows patterns and that what happened to me had happened to countless others, it helped. It made me feel less isolated, less stupid, less like this was somehow my fault. These women, they got it. They understood the shame and the fear and the anger in a way that even my well-meaning parents couldn't. And they celebrated my victories with me the first night I slept through without nightmares. The first time I went to the grocery store alone without having a panic attack. The first time I could talk about what happened without crying. The divorce was finalized when Emma was 4 months old. Marcus didn't contest anything. He signed over our house to me. I sold it immediately. I could never live there again and agreed to child support, though I knew I'd never see most of it while he was in prison. His lawyer tried one more time to negotiate visitation rights, but I refused. I told my lawyer that he could petition the court when he got out of prison if he wanted, but I wasn't agreeing to anything now. I needed those first few years with my daughter to be safe, to be free from his shadow, to establish our life without the fear of him showing up. The judge agreed with me, said that given the severity of his crime and the age of the child, it was in Emma's best interest to have no contact with her father until such time as he could prove he was rehabilitated and no longer a danger. Barbara tried to sue for grandparents' rights. She actually had the audacity to take me to court, claiming she had a right to see her granddaughter. My lawyer tore her apart. She brought up Barbara's statement to the police, where she justified Marcus beating me. She argued that Barbara had witnessed her son committing a felony assault on a pregnant woman and had done nothing to stop it, had actually blamed the victim. She presented evidence that Barbara had enabled and encouraged Marcus's abusive behavior throughout our marriage. The judge denied her petition immediately, said that grandparents' rights exist to maintain beneficial relationships, and there was no evidence that a relationship with Barbara would be beneficial to Emma in any way. In fact, the judge said, given Barbara's history and her role in the abuse, allowing her access to Emma could potentially be harmful. Barbara left that courtroom screaming about how I'd turned everyone against her, how I'd ruined her family, how I was a liar and a manipulator. Security had to escort her out. I never heard from her again. When Emma was 7 months old, I went back to work. I'd used all my leave, all my sick days, and I needed the income and the health insurance. My parents helped with childcare, and I was fortunate that my school was understanding and supportive. My principal knew what had happened. It had been in the news, after all, local teacher's husband arrested for beating her while pregnant, and she made accommodations for me. If I needed to leave early for therapy or doctor's appointments, I could. If I had a bad day and needed support, there were counselors I could talk to. My students never knew the details, but they knew something had happened, and they were kind in the way that teenagers can be when they actually care. Teaching gave me purpose again, gave me something to focus on besides trauma and fear. It reminded me that I was more than what had happened to me, that I had value and skills and something to contribute to the world. Emma's first birthday was bittersweet. I threw her a small party with my parents, a few close friends, and some of the support group members who'd become like family to me. We celebrated this beautiful, healthy, happy little girl who was hitting all her milestones, who laughed and played and brought so much light into my life. But I couldn't help thinking about everything that had led to this moment, about how close we'd come to never having this day at all. I thought about Marcus, sitting in a prison cell, missing his daughter's first birthday because of his own choices, his own violence. I thought about the life we could have had if he'd been a different person, if he'd been the man I thought I was marrying, and then I pushed those thoughts away because they didn't matter. This was our life now, mine and Emma's, and it was a good life, a safe life, and that was what mattered. Around that time, Jennifer, the nurse who'd saved us, reached out to me. She'd gotten my contact information through the hospital's social work department with my permission, and she asked if she'd like to meet for coffee. I said yes. And when we met, she told me that what had happened with me had affected her deeply, that she'd been thinking about us, wondering how we were doing. I showed her pictures of Emma, told her about our life, and I thanked her. I thanked her for being smart enough and brave enough to do what she'd done that day, for knowing exactly what to say to trap Marcus, for giving me the opening I needed to tell the truth. She got emotional, said that in 20 years of nursing, She'd seen too many women and babies lost to domestic violence, that she'd learned to spot the signs and to act fast. She said she'd suspected what had really happened the moment she saw my injuries, and she'd known I wouldn't tell the truth with him in the room. So she'd had to find a way to get him out and protect me at the same time. I asked her about what she'd said, about the photographs being automatically sent to the police, and she smiled. She said, "We do photograph injuries on pregnant patients, and we do report suspected abuse to the authorities, but it's not automatic, and it's not immediate the way I made it sound." I exaggerated to scare him, to make him think he was already caught so he wouldn't try to intimidate you or stop you from talking. I needed him to believe there was no point in trying to control the narrative anymore, because the evidence was already in police hands. It was a gamble, but it worked. I just stared at her, amazed at her quick thinking, at her courage, at her willingness to bend the truth to protect me. She'd outsmarted my abuser, backed him into a corner, and saved my life with her words. We stayed in touch after that, met for coffee every few months. She became a friend, one of the few people who truly understood what that day had been like, who'd been there in the moment when everything changed. The second year after Emma was born was better. The nightmares became less frequent. The panic attacks became more manageable. I learned my triggers and developed coping mechanisms. I got stronger, physically and emotionally. Emma grew into a funny, sweet, energetic toddler who loved books and music and making people laugh. She had my eyes and, unfortunately, her father's dark hair, but every time I looked at her, I saw only her, not him, not the trauma, just her own perfect self. I started to believe that maybe we really would be okay, that maybe we could have a normal life despite everything. Marcus was released from prison when Emma was 2.5 years old. I got a notification from victim services, and the fear came flooding back. I knew he couldn't come near us because of the restraining order, but just knowing he was out in the world again, free to move around, potentially looking for us, it terrified me. I took extra precautions. I changed our daily routines, made sure my parents and my school knew to be vigilant, kept my doors locked and my alarm system on at all times. I looked over my shoulder constantly, jumped at every unexpected sound. The anxiety I'd worked so hard to overcome came roaring back, and I had to increase my therapy sessions again to deal with it. But he never came. 6 months passed, then a year, and there was no sign of him. Victim services told me he'd moved to a different state, was working and attending his mandated programs, was complying with all the terms of his probation. His probation officer confirmed that he'd made no attempts to contact me or find out where we lived, and slowly, very slowly, I started to relax again. Maybe he'd realized the magnitude of what he'd done. Maybe he'd changed, grown, understood that he'd destroyed his family with his violence. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to try to be in Emma's life. Either way, the result was the same. We were safe, we were free, and we could live our lives without fear of him showing up. Now, 2 years later, Emma is 4.5 years old. She's in preschool, thriving, making friends, learning and growing. She's never met her father, doesn't know who he is, doesn't ask about him yet. When she's older and the questions come, I'll tell her the truth, in age-appropriate ways. I'll tell her that her daddy made very bad choices that hurt Mommy when Mommy was pregnant with her, and that he had to go away because of those choices. I'll tell her that it's not her fault, that she is loved and wanted and perfect exactly as she is. I'll tell her that some people have daddies and some people don't, and that's okay, that families come in all different shapes and sizes. And when she's much older, when she can understand, I'll tell her the full truth. I'll tell her that her father beat me while I was pregnant with her, that he nearly killed us both, and that a brave nurse saved us by being smart and quick thinking. I'll tell her, because I want her to know that abuse is never okay, that no one has the right to hurt you, that there are people who will help if you're in danger. As for me, I'm doing better than I ever thought I would be. I still have bad days, days where the trauma feels fresh and overwhelming. I still have moments where a man's raised voice or a sudden movement sends my heart racing. I still have scars, physical and emotional, that will never fully fade. But I also have good days now, more good days than bad. I have my daughter, who brings me more joy than I knew was possible. I have my parents, who supported me through the darkest time of my life. I have my friends, my support group, my therapist, my students, my purpose. I have my life back, a life that's mine, that no one controls but me. I went back to dating last year, which was terrifying but necessary. I needed to prove to myself that I could trust again, that not all men were like Marcus. I've been seeing someone for 6 months now, a gentle, kind man who knows my history and has never once made me feel unsafe. It's slow and careful, and I'm taking my time, but it gives me hope that maybe someday I can have a healthy relationship, that maybe I can show Emma what love is supposed to look like. She deserves to see that, to know that relationships don't have to involve fear and pain and violence. I also started speaking publicly about domestic violence. It started small, sharing my story at a fundraiser for a local women's shelter, but it's grown from there. I've spoken at schools, at community centers, at conferences for healthcare workers. I tell my story not because I want pity or attention, but because I want people to understand how common this is, how it can happen to anyone, how important it is to watch for the signs and to help when you can. I talk about the warning signs. I missed the controlling behavior, the isolation, the way Marcus made everything about him and his needs. I talk about how abuse often escalates during pregnancy, how vulnerable women are when they're pregnant, and how critical it is that healthcare workers are trained to spot and respond to abuse. And I always talk about Jennifer and what she did that day, because her quick thinking and bravery saved our lives. And more healthcare workers need to know that they have that power, that a few well-chosen words can change everything. The advocacy work has given me purpose beyond just surviving. It's turned my trauma into something meaningful, something that can help others. Every time I speak, women come up to me afterward and share their own stories, or tell me they've been worried about a friend or family member, and now they know what to do, or thank me for giving them the courage to leave their own abusive relationships. Those conversations, they make everything worth it. They make me feel like what happened to me and Emma wasn't just random violence, wasn't just meaningless suffering. It's part of a larger story about survival and resilience, and the power of speaking truth. But here's what I want you to understand. What I need everyone watching this to understand. What happened to me can happen to anyone. I was educated, employed, financially independent, surrounded by family and friends, and I still ended up on the floor of my nursery being beaten by my husband while 6 months pregnant. Abuse doesn't discriminate. It doesn't only happen to certain types of women or in certain types of relationships. It happens behind closed doors, in nice houses, in good neighborhoods to women who look like they have it all together. And that's why we have to talk about it. We have to share these stories, uncomfortable as they are, because silence protects abusers. Silence allows them to operate, to hurt, to destroy lives while everyone around them pretends not to see. If you're watching this and you're in an abusive relationship, I need you to hear me. It's not your fault. You didn't cause this. You can't fix him. You can't love him enough or be perfect enough or compliant enough to make him stop. Abusers abuse because of who they are, not because of what you did or didn't do. And you deserve better. You deserve to be safe, to be respected, to be loved without fear. Your children deserve to grow up in a home without violence. I know leaving feels impossible. I know you're scared of what he'll do, of how you'll survive, of being alone. But I'm here to tell you that whatever you're scared of, it's not as bad as staying. It's not as bad as ending up in the ER bleeding and wondering if your baby is going to survive. It's not as bad as living the rest of your life, looking over your shoulder, walking on eggshells, teaching your children that this is what love looks like. There are people who will help you. There are shelters, hotlines, legal advocates, social workers, counselors, support groups, an entire infrastructure of people dedicated to helping domestic violence survivors escape and rebuild their lives. You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to have it all figured out before you leave. You just have to take the first step. Reach out to one person. Make one call. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233, And they're available 24/7. They'll help you make a safety plan, find resources, figure out your next steps. And if you can't call because he monitors your phone, you can text START to 88788 or chat with them on their website. There is help available, you just have to reach for it. And if you're watching this, and you're not in an abusive relationship but you suspect someone you know might be, please pay attention. Please look for the signs, the controlling behavior, the isolation, the way she always has excuses for bruises or canceled plans, or why she can't do things without checking with him first. Please create opportunities for her to talk to you privately. Please believe her if she tells you what's happening. Please don't judge her for staying or for going back. Leaving an abusive relationship takes an average of 7 attempts. Please offer practical help. Let her know she can stay with you. Help her research resources. Offer to go with her to court or to therapy or to the police station. Your support could save her life. And to the healthcare workers watching this, especially those who work in emergency rooms and obstetrics, thank you for the work you do. Thank you for being the ones who see us at our most vulnerable, who piece together the truth from the lies we tell to protect our abusers. Please keep watching for the signs. Please keep asking the questions, gently but persistently. Please keep documenting everything, taking photos, following protocols, reporting what you see. And please, if you ever find yourself in a situation like Jennifer was in that day with me, please be brave enough to do what she did. Be smart. Be strategic. Find a way to separate the victim from the abuser. Find a way to make the abuser believe he's caught, that there's no point in continuing to intimidate or control. Use your authority, your knowledge of the system, your position to protect vulnerable patients. You have more power than you realize. You can be the difference between someone dying and someone surviving. I think about that day in the hospital all the time. I think about how different things could have been if Jennifer hadn't been my nurse, if she hadn't been trained to spot abuse, if she hadn't been brave enough and smart enough to do what she did. I might have gone home with Marcus. He might have hurt me again, hurt Emma after she was born. We might not be here at all. But Jennifer gave me a chance, gave us both a chance, and I will spend the rest of my life grateful for that. She's the reason I'm standing here today, healthy and whole, raising my daughter in safety and peace. She's the reason Emma is thriving instead of growing up in a home filled with violence or worse, not growing up at all. So thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for seeing me, for believing me, for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. Thank you for being exactly who I needed in that moment. Thank you for showing me that there are good people in this world who will fight for strangers, who will put themselves on the line to do what's right. You're my hero, and you always will be. And to everyone else watching, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for taking the time to hear about the worst day of my life and how I survived it. Please share this video. Please share it with everyone you know, because somewhere out there, there's a woman who needs to hear this. There's a woman who's going through what I went through, who feels trapped and hopeless and alone, who thinks there's no way out. And maybe, just maybe, hearing my story will give her the courage to reach out for help. Maybe it will save her life, save her baby's life, the way Jennifer's words saved ours. Before I go, I want to leave you with this. You are stronger than you think. You are braver than you believe. You deserve a life free from fear and violence. And no matter how dark things seem right now, no matter how impossible escape feels, there is hope. There is life after abuse. There is healing and peace and joy waiting for you on the other side of this nightmare. I'm living proof of that. Emma is living proof of that. We made it out, we survived, and we're building a beautiful life together. You can too. Please don't give up. Please keep fighting. Please reach out for help. Your life is worth saving. You are worth saving. And if you're watching this and you relate to my story, if you see yourself in what I've described, please hit that like button right now. Please subscribe to this channel. And please, most importantly, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and letting me know you heard this message. Tell me if this helped you, if this gave you hope, if this made you think about your own situation differently. I read every single comment, and knowing that my story is helping others, that's what keeps me going. That's what makes reliving this trauma over and over worth it. To the person who's in danger right now, who's scared and alone and doesn't know what to do, I see you. I was you. And I'm telling you that you can survive this. You can escape. You can rebuild. Your story doesn't have to end the way he wants it to. You can write a different ending, one where you and your children are safe and free and happy. It won't be easy. It will be the hardest thing you've ever done, but it will be worth it. I promise you, it will be worth it. Call the hotline. Text a friend. Tell a doctor or a nurse or a teacher or anyone who will listen. Take the first step, and then take the next one, and the next one. One step at a time, one day at a time, you can get out. You can survive. You can thrive. Look at me, I'm living proof. Look at my daughter, happy and healthy and safe, she's living proof. We made it, you can too. My name is Sarah. I'm 36 years old. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I was beaten by my husband while 6 months pregnant, and a brave nurse saved my life and my daughter's life by saying exactly the right thing at exactly the right moment. This is my story. This is our story. And I'm sharing it with you because I want you to know that you're not alone, that there is help, that there is hope, and that there is life after abuse. A good life. A life worth fighting for. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And please, if you take nothing else from this video, take this. Abuse is never your fault. You deserve to be safe. And there are people who will help you if you just reach out. Don't suffer in silence. Don't protect your abuser at the cost of your own life and safety. Speak up. Reach out. Survive. And then, when you're ready, thrive. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment below. Share your story if you feel safe doing so, or just let me know you were here, that you heard this message. Every comment, every like, every share, it all helps spread awareness about domestic violence and potentially saves lives. So please, take a moment and engage with this content. Help me help others the way Jennifer helped me. And remember, you are strong, you are worthy, you are loved, and you deserve so much better than what you're getting. There is a way out. There is hope. There is a future waiting for you where you're safe and free and happy. I believe in you. Now you need to believe in yourself. Thank you. Stay safe. And please, if you need help, reach out today. Don't wait. Your life might depend on it.